To remain updated with the latest business news, click on the bell icon.
He is a pillar of the Indian banking system. The troubleshooter India banks on. But Kundapur Vaman Kamath has also created a legion of women managers. The newly appointed chairperson of SEBI, Madhabi Puri Buch, is a protege of Kamath. Zarin Daruwala, the current CEO of the Standard Chartered Bank, rose in ranks as the wholesale banking head in ICICI under Kamath's tutelage. Seven-time Business Today Most Powerful Woman Award winner Renuka Ramnath built ICICI's private equity arm under Kamath. Kamath also groomed Vishakha Mulye, who is the current ED, wholesale banking of ICICI Bank. Through all this, KV Kamath has succeeded in creating an environment of gender diversity at ICICI, ensuring new generations of women leaders.
Mr. KV Kamath, thank you very, very much for joining us this evening. And as you have seen, we have been really, really privileged to be, graced by your presence this evening. You have mentored so many people who are so many, in terms of leadership roles now leading various organizations, the latest being the Securities and Exchange Board of India. I will therefore, taking off from some of the comments made in that very interesting session Abha moderated just before me, I will ask you some things relating to that. You are known and respected for having mentored women leaders at ICICI Bank all through your tenure across levels, many of whom have done excellently well, as I just said. And yet, as I mentioned in my opening address, not enough is being witnessed in terms of women leadership, women's participation in the workforce, women representation on the boards. What are your initial thoughts on this, and what do you think we can do to rectify that?
Thank you, Sourav. I think the answer lies in our previous session. Most of the answers and the challenges, and through those challenges, the answers have already been spelled out. So it may be probably best if I put a few things in context, and that probably gives our perspective on what happened in the bank during those years. Anjali mentioned Mr. Wagul. It was indeed Mr. Wagul who laid the foundation by basically opening the doors to women leaders. Well, they were women professionals. They graduated to be leaders much later. So that set the path. That was the first thing that happened. So you need a funnel, and that also was mentioned. And we probably created that funnel due to the foresight of my predecessor. We kept that going, but very quickly we found a challenge that was there. Biases that are also mentioned, and you had to actively work on how to get those biases out. The biases primarily are on two fronts. A male bias, which I would say goes like this, that, oh, this cannot be done by a woman. And that is something that has to be kept firmly out of the door. There is no job, at least that I have seen, that a woman cannot do. And if you acknowledge that, and that is very difficult for many men to acknowledge, then I think the path gets smoother. So we then built, I would say, a team of women leaders who could take that decision very easily. And in a way, the men did not take the decision, the women took the decision for themselves. I will just add one more. There are a few more which are also mentioned, and I'll put them in our context. The second is, in terms of the next opportunity, equal pay and the next opportunity. If you have a history where it is men leaders in the HR department who have made these decisions, you are going to be left behind whether you want or not. So you need to make sure that the decision-making process, at time when you are evaluating progress and looking at opportunities, both ways, has got a strong base of women leaders also who shape that decision. I'm not going to use the word influence the decision, but shape the decision so that it is fair and it is without bias. These are the two things. The third thing we will discuss as we go along was also mentioned, that is the challenges that happen as you go along your career on two fronts. Primarily the family front. the challenges on the family front, there are several of them. Some of them were mentioned, but in our case, the most frequently seen challenge was, my husband has moved to Singapore. I need to go. And I had women leaders who would actually challenge the woman leader and say, why do you have to go? Why doesn't he stay back? So these sort of challenges need to be asked. So, but the key, as I say, is have a broad funnel and completely eliminate bias from your mindset. Then you are making progress. You're not getting there, but you're making progress.
Sir, there's also been an opinion at earlier forums, one has heard this being said by women leaders, in fact, saying that there is, because of this bias, this deep-rooted biases being there in the workplace, not enough women actually put up their hands and stand up and be counted for senior leadership roles. And of course, there's the other part where, it is assumed that you will not be up for it in terms of your ability to devote time to that role. Do you think that's changing, or do you think that continues?
I think, frankly, it is, to me, again, sorry to say, a male-centered view, which, has gotten embedded and creates a challenge for women leaders. And it's, again, part of the bias process. I'll give you a story and how a bias comes in and how you then, the bias, if it's not corrected, grows. This is very early on. I had just come back in '96 as CEO. And one day I was clearing proposals which are going to the board. And there were 4 or 5 professionals around me, and I think 2 of them were women. And I knew that all worked very hard because we got very tight deadlines. So I asked, and this is '96, things weren't very comfortable in Mumbai. So I asked one of the women leaders, what time did you go home yesterday? And she said, I went home at 1 o'clock. So I asked the next question, which had to follow, were you comfortable going home, and how did you go home? She said, I took a taxi. And she looked at me. So that basically gave me the answer that this is my bias that is asking that question. So we did take some steps because we did not want to say that you are not going to work late, but we took some steps. Discreetly, we said, if somebody is working late beyond 10 o'clock, we will arrange for a car to take you home. And this was going to be once a month or so. It was not going to be a daily thing that got settled. We had a similar challenge when we said, we will run our branches 8 to 8, 2 shifts. Because we had limited number of branches and a lot of things to do. Again, women cannot do this job. And there again, there it was interesting. No woman leader said, I am not willing to do this job. I don't think I had a single instance of that. But there would be parents-in-law calling in and saying, my daughter-in-law or my daughter is coming home at 9:30. And typically my colleague Lalita, the time joint managing director, would field these calls. And she would actually calm down the family member first, then have a talk with the woman leader and say that this is the call that I got. And so on. It was very interesting what she shared with me, that in every single case, the woman leader took umbrage that somebody from the family could call the office and say that my daughter or daughter-in-law is coming late. So I can well imagine the fight that women leaders have to put through to succeed in this. And if we can eliminate some of these issues in a quiet way, without making it into a gender issue, without making it into a bias issue, but something that in a context we have to address, I think we will then create a truly what I would call a neutral basis for people to grow irrespective of gender.
Mr. Kamath, one has to ask you this as the MD and CEO of ICICI Bank, which you've served. What is it about women and finance that gets them into leadership positions? Or is it just that we've been used to seeing them and now they are everywhere? Is there something about women leadership in finance, particularly the finance minister now, the SEBI chairman, and many, many others across banks and financial institutions earlier also?
I would say that it is the funnel. From my experience, it is the funnel. A, B, your intent to remove bias in everything that you do, starting with your thought and then every action that you do, and thereafter giving equal opportunity in every area that you do. And I think today what has happened is the pool is getting deeper and deeper. I think some of the panelists talk about, the pool is not yet deep enough. I agree. Because if you look at the number of women in STEM. That was also used. I think Anjali mentioned that in the 30s now, 30 to 40%, somewhere there. But it is not a very old pool. The pool has gotten, I think, richer and richer only in the last 5-6 years. So my guess here is that the women leaders are actually growing up the chain in the organizations. And the real time to look at and take stock is probably 4 to 5 years. One point here is people try to do what I call lateral movement. Lateral movement will happen and will succeed only if there is a pool. But if there is no pool, then how do you get the lateral movement in? So I would think the pool has to increase, and that's happening at very rapid pace. Secondly, people are growing into their jobs much earlier. So they are rising faster. So I'm sure that pool is. But there is one other solution that we use successfully in ICICI, and that is basically to say, can we reskill or repurpose a person? Repurpose not in terms of the purpose of the organization, repurpose in the context of what is the skill set that you're doing. I think a great example is Kalpana, my colleague Kalpana. Kalpana is a lawyer, but somewhere within the first 3 or 4 years when she was growing up the ladder, I said, as a chief legal officer or whatever role you have limited scope, and there is somebody there who is going to be there 7-8 years. So I move you laterally to treasury. So initially he said, I have no skills at all. I said, you will learn those skills. And you see where she reached as a consequence of that decision she took. And thereafter, we have tried to do that. So there are ways in which you could do this. But again, the organization needs to have a mindset which is completely neutral and blind to this challenge.
Mr. Kamath, one also hears stories about women entrepreneurs, and this is again a continuing concern about women entrepreneurs not getting enough funding, startups not getting enough support from VCs, PEs, and even banks. Do you think that is a concern which sort of worries you as well?
Might have been a concern a few years back, but I think at least from my perspective, where I'm more of a desk chair analyst these days. So when I look at it, if Anjali, I heard Anjali talk, and I heard Deepali talk, and other ladies on the panel, I think that is changing and falling by the wayside very quickly. The PE world is much smarter than the banking world, and in that world, they will identify the leader again, irrespective of gender and any biases that are there. And indeed, in today's world, I think a woman can probably do several jobs better than a man. And I can say this, if you ask me, give examples, I won't because we don't have time, give examples of what women have done and what men have done. In ICICI during my career, I think the lateral thought and innovative thinking that has come out of my women leaders is probably 2 to 1 as compared to men or higher. But at least 2 to 1 in terms of anything that would have done in the organization.
Mr. Kamath, when one has got you, one can't let you go without some question on the economy at least, given what is happening around us. Now we have an oil shock staring us in the face. The economic survey, sort of reckoned the growth rate given $70 to $75 a barrel oil prices, and we know where we are right now, well over 100, 110. What are your chief concerns given the fact that there has been a huge expenditure push in the budget and you are at NaBFID right now? What are the key concerns right now for the economy?
On the oil front, my view is that this should correct because this is otherwise a global problem which I don't think the West wants either. I'll put it in context. Do you think the West can survive with inflation upwards of 5, 7, 6, 7, 8? And we have heard Western, I would say, thought leaders say that if your inflation rises, then you better increase your interest rates. Have you seen anybody increase interest rates? Across Europe, it is still near zero. US, it's still below 2%. Inflation is well over 7%. So whereas economic theory, which was pushed down into us, the developing world, where has that gone? So what I'm trying to say is, I don't want them to correct themselves, but this cannot last long for them. So this one. But second and third, I would think that we have a long runway as it is. The Honorable PM mentioned that, the Honorable Finance Minister mentioned that. Basically, the 25-year horizon that they have given is absolutely spot on. If you look at what needs to be done. So you have propensity to grow. It is not as if you're struggling to find where you will grow. That's number one. The second is we have another big driver with us, and that is the digital economy. The digital economy, if I look at, say, our neighbors, it's now 35 to 40% of the overall GDP. And this momentum is there for last 8-10 years. In our context, this is just starting. And again, we have leaders who are funding these sort of initiatives. And the rate at which this will grow is going to be phenomenal. I would believe that if not 25-30%, let's assume it grows to 15-20% in the next 3 to 5 years. That is, if you had, say, 8% aspirational growth, you add another 20-25% there, you're looking at 10%. So you are getting to double-digit growth because of this new driver that is happening. Yesterday, I've been looking at some interesting numbers. What I would look at it as a simple thing. If you are, any one of you goes on YouTube and looks at YouTube content creators. I don't want to go into influencers. I don't want any of these things. YouTube content creators, not influencers. Content creator could be somebody sitting in a village cooking channel, somebody who is in a village and blogging his daily life or this. And the number of views and what is happening to the advertising platform and wealth creation at one hand in their hands. But that also is not the story. To me, the story is every single content creator is probably now giving employment to a whole host of people. And yesterday I saw a number which was very interesting. YouTube number put out by YouTube yesterday, it needs verification I would say, that 7 lakh jobs have been created in the last 2 years just by the content creators on YouTube. This is, your lifestyle improves, so you then you then buy a second, you buy from a cycle you go into a motorcycle, from a motorcycle you go to a car, and so on and so forth. You buy a new home, you put air conditioners, you can actually see it happening. We used to say it in 97, 98, that's a transformation happening in India. The white collar revolution had done that. And we would say that aspiration is changing from 21-inch television to 28-inch television. And from a cycle to a motorcycle. You're now seeing it all over again, driven by several digital media. And I would think this has not yet been captured or factored into economic growth. So my view is that we run a tight ship. Luckily for us, the banking balance sheets are clear. The corporate balance sheets are clear. I think the government has figured out how to lend a helping hand without destabilizing the fiscal balance, as it were. And the Reserve Bank has also played structurally a very important role. If you have all these in alignment, I think our path should be to those 25 years ahead and sequence it. And the sequencing is very clear. We have got an infrastructure growth pipeline for those 25 years. The digital growth pipeline also for 25 years. Manufacturing, I think, is quickly coming of age. And they will grow on their own because that is a well-set industry in India. So I think we're going to have very interesting times looking at.
And a lot of it, like you wrote also for our anniversary issue about the digital super cycle. That's the one which you're betting on for growth.
The digital super cycle is the one I mentioned, probably growth of 20 to 25% on top of what we have. So it is a pie. It is a cherry on this pie that is growth.
Iconic banker KV KAMATH. Ladies and gentlemen, a major round of applause for Mr. Kamath for all that he has achieved. And thank you very much, Mr. Kamath, for speaking to us. Thank you so much, sir.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.